I have covered Mac virtualization options a few times on my channel, and recently at an event I was at, I met a new tool in the tool chain of Mac virtualization options. This is virtualizing Mac OS on Mac OS. Why would you want to do that? Well, testing mostly, for developers and for other reasons. And recent changes in Mac OS have actually made this far easier, hence the proliferation of tools. This is a tool from Mac Stadium, who have long run data centers and other virtualization options for macOS mostly to sell. And now they have Orka Desktop, which is a free tool for those who want to virtualize macOS. And it adds a few extra things that I found quite interesting and making it worth considering. So before I jump in, I am Christian Schiller. You can find more about me at christianschiller.com. And if you enjoy this video, then just take a look at all the buttons and things you can do in the YouTube player to say thanks or spread the word. With that out the way, let's get stuck in. With that out the way, let's get started. So I'll just open up the application. There's information about the system it's hosted on, and then default settings for locations of the various things it downloads, as well as new VM defaults. These can be overridden on each VM you create. So I'm going to create a new VM. There's two options here, clean install and pull from the OCI registry. I will come back to that. So you can give the VM a name and select the source IPSW, which apparently is iPhone software, or just the latest version. And there's actually resources for these files and a bunch of settings for the display. Again, overriding the CPU and memory, and then hit install. This download and installation will take quite some time, macOS. But once it is done, you can see an overview of the configuration and the virtual machine you just created. And there's a few options here, but I'm going to start by clicking Start. Again, installing macOS, because it's mostly a consumer operating system, in fact, largely a consumer operating system. It's not really designed to run like this, which is sort of the point of tools like Orka, and I'll come to how that helps in a minute. But the setup can also take a while. So I'll jump through a lot of the setup steps now, setting language, region, etc. I won't show them all because if you've ever installed macOS, you've seen them anyway. It's not that interesting to watch. But then eventually, when all that is done, you find yourself at macOS. I'll just have a look just to show you. Yep, this is Sequoia 1501 running on a virtual machine, and macOS actually recognizes that, which is interesting as well. And this is all representing these new features in Sequoia. You can see the processor is virtualized. Also, so is the display. In addition to skipping the setup, I'm going to make some very minor changes, which is to add a reminder. It's very minor. You'd probably do more than that, especially like software setup and things like that. But I just want to demonstrate how this works. So now that is my new image. I will shut down. And now I can push this to a container registry, to an OCI, Open Container Initiative compatible registry. This is probably the hardest part of this, or the first hard part, is actually figuring out the registry details. I'm using Docker Hub, as you can see in the background, and it's not always immediately apparent what the URL is. But I figured it out to be registry-1.docker.io, and then the username and repository where you want to push to, as you can see behind. And then your username and password is the username and password for the registry. If you don't have a username and password for the registry, you can leave it blank. Now, again, pushing is going to take a while. This is big. You don't normally, well, in my usage of Docker and containers, I wouldn't normally push a container this large, and it's, yeah, it will take a while. So I will leave this running here, and come back when it's done. It took probably about 30 to 40 minutes, and that's a very basic installation of macOS. Yeah, it's not designed for this kind of thing. I will reiterate that again. Once it is done, it's sometimes a little hard to see because the usual view, especially you get in Docker Hub, is of more on these pages. Although if you click into the tags, you can see that something actually happened. So now what I can do is I'll delete this virtual machine and then recreate it from the image. Much like any other image on a machine, if you're using Orka Desktop, for example, it does detect if you already have the image locally, and if there are no changes, then it doesn't need to do very much. So this is not going to be particularly slow. But if I was pulling a clean image, which I will do in a minute, it will take longer. So I just put in the same details here, and everything else about this new VM form is the same. I'm just specifying where I'm pulling the image from. And I'm going to change a few settings just to show that I can use an image on a quote-unquote new machine, and it will accommodate things and pull, and this will not take so long. And before I start it, I'm just going to show you kind of the file sizes we're talking about here. This is following the path set in the Orka preferences. And if I find those images, it's the logs inside the share folder. Yeah, and I'll just do a get info. You can see that's, yeah, quite large. This can get big and take up a lot of disk space quite quickly. But anyway, I'm going to start it, and there will be a little bit of boot time, but you'll see that we go straight to the load screen. Same as when you see on a physical Mac. That's my username. I'll put in my password. And if you need any more proof, this is fairly clear already. You can now open the reminders. And there we go. There's the reminder I created. Now, there are other sources of these image files. On this Orka Desktop GitHub repository is one, but there are actually other sources to get these images. Of course, trust your sources. It's a virtual machine, so it can only do so much, but still, this doesn't need a username and password. And I'll pull this. This will also take some time, a little bit faster than Sequoia, but there we go. And now it's done. I can hit start, and we won't get the installation screen. This is a pre-configured image, and this is already looking a little bit different. I don't know what the password is, but I'm going to have an educated guess and just put in admin. Seems to have worked. And we can already see this is different, but just to prove it, I will go up to About This Mac, and we can see this is Sonoma, not Sequoia. And of course, the beauty here is you can share all of these pre-configured images around your company. And that was my look at Orka Desktop. I hope to have a look at MacStadium's other Orka options, connecting this kind of tool up to Kubernetes and Terraform and all these other sort of tools and options in the cloud native space could be quite interesting for macOS images as well as the traditional Linux images. From a virtualization option, Orka Desktop doesn't add too much, but that ability to share around those images in a standard way using that OCI compliance is where things are really interesting. If you want to find out more, you can head on over to macstadium.com and download Orka Desktop for free. As I said, I hope to cover some of the other tools they offer in the future, but until then, I have been Christian Schiller. You can find more about me at christianschiller.com. Show me if you found this video interesting by leaving a comment, by sharing, thanking me, subscribing, etc., all the usual stuff that YouTubers ask you to do. Thank you very much for joining me, and take care, everybody.